Good morning. Good morning, everybody. If I could just get your attention real quick, we're going to get started here in just a minute. I don't want to cut out good conversation, but please continue to eat breakfast. I'm just going to talk and just do a brief introduction here quick, and then we're just going to get going. We're kind of on a time constraint, I know, with Howard and Dale's schedules, so we just want to make sure to take full opportunity to speak to them and hear from them this morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bob Berglund. I'm the Executive Director of the Dodgeville Area Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for coming. I am blown away by the attendance. It's great to see so many faces here, and we're just glad that you could join us. We want to thank our partners with this, Diane and the Dodgeville School District. Thank you for helping with this. Mineral Point Chamber has been a partner with this, and then, of course, Nick and his staff here at the Dodgeville waking up early to serve us a great breakfast. He always does a great job, so thank you to them. Just a quick little bit about what the Chamber's working on and why we're doing this morning. The Chamber really focused a lot in the past years on tourism and events and doing those for the community. And our Board of Directors really has wanted to make an effort to make sure that we are a business and community organization, making sure that we are doing what we can to make sure that our community is successful as a whole. So we established some new goals over the last year or so. And on your table are little handouts, something for you just to take a look at, take with you. The question that we get asked a lot is, well, what the heck is the Chamber doing? Well, these are the things that the Chamber is doing right here, besides helping with events and tourism. And I'm sure some of you saw the spotlight that was in the paper this last week that Gene Burns-Jones did on us. We do a lot, and we're involved in a lot of activities. And some of the new activities that we're doing, one of them is business and economic development. We worked quite a bit with Bob Page and his staff for Bob's Bitchin' Barbecue, the new Wild Weasel opening up with Win and Justine, the owners there. We're doing a lot of efforts making sure that we are trying to bring new businesses in, but also making sure that our businesses are being successful in the community. We've put a focus on education. On Tuesday, we just finished up a 3-part seminar series, Business at Noon. Been focusing on customer service and social media. It's something that we're going to continue to do. We're actually going to do a healthcare forum here hopefully in May that you'll be seeing some more information about. And the whole purpose of that is to educate the public, let them know what's going on, give them resources so that they can be more successful in their business. That's a big push. And the last push for us is exactly why we're here this morning, is advocacy. We feel it's very important to have a strong partnership with our representatives. And I have the opportunity to talk with Howard and Dale and their staffs on a regular basis, and in my mind, I'm like, okay, we've got a good relationship. But I saw a lot of people that don't know Howard and Dale here this morning, and it's our goal at the Chamber to make sure that you know and have a connection with your representatives, and I think it's important to have that. So what we wanted to do this morning is have this breakfast. It's something I remember calling Howard's office probably, a year and a half ago, Howard, and tried to set something up, and it just hasn't fired, and now we're able to do that this morning. The purpose of this morning is purely informational. The Chamber's not taking a side one way or the other. It is our goal to make a connection with our representatives, for you to be educated on a variety of issues. I know a lot of you are here for school vouchers, and that's great this morning. But we've asked Howard and Dale to do a general overview, and that's going to be the main focus of this morning. What's going on with the budget, what's going on with healthcare, what's going on with anything else that they feel is important for you to know as business owners and as community members here in the area. So I'm going to have Howard come up here in a minute. He's going to talk for about 10 minutes or so, then I'm going to welcome Dale to come up and do the same. And then I'm going to have Dr. Stats come up and just give a brief overview. Dr. Bambi Stats is another one of our guests. She's back here at this table right here, if you don't know her. And she's going to be doing a larger presentation tonight at 7 o'clock at the Dodgeville High School on school vouchers. But she's just going to give a brief overview of what she's going to be talking about. And then we're going to open up to the floor, open it up to questions that you might have. I'm going to ask, I'm going to moderate a little bit, but I'm going to ask that we try to stay off our soapboxes and whatever the whatever the topic is that you'd want to talk about, and that you ask questions, whatever that may be, and so that Dale and Howard can give information back. And then Dale and Howard both need to get out of here at a decent time. I believe you need to be out of here by about 10 to 8, Howard. So we're going to wrap it up there, 5 to 8. We're going to try to wrap it up because he's got some other schedules. So we're going to get going here. again, thank you for coming, and we appreciate you coming out this morning. And Howard, do you want to come up and start?
Thanks, Bob. Good morning. Can you hear me okay without putting the mic up to my my mouth? So, what I want to do is talk a little bit, first of all, about kind of a high-level comments about the state budget, and talk about that process a bit. I've got some a couple of handouts. I didn't bring enough, so you may have to share some of these, but. I want to talk about the budget, the governor's budget, and the process, and where we're at, and where we're going. The governor introduced his budget, and the handout that I have, it's two-sided. It was just a copy out of one of our budget documents from the Fiscal Bureau. And the governor introduced his budget on February 15th this year. And since that time, we've been obviously getting a lot of input from people, which is very welcome. We've had a chance to dig into some of the details. Fiscal Bureau has started to analyze in greater detail some of the implications of the budget, and we get various reports from Fiscal Bureau. The Joint Finance Committee has had listening sessions throughout the state. Those concluded last week, a little over a week ago. And from a process standpoint, today they start doing their work. The Joint Finance Committee starts doing their work. And this is when the Joint Finance Committee votes on various amendments to the governor's budget. So, and I can't remember all of the various agencies that they'll be acting on today, but today really starts, I guess what I would call, the budget really kind of changing from the governor's budget to the legislature's budget. So I guess I would encourage all of you to stay engaged on this over the next probably 4 to 6 weeks is my guess in terms of when the Joint Finance Committee is going to complete their work. I wanted to, again, just talk a little bit about kind of the high-level sorts of things. You'll notice, and the handout that I gave is just general purpose revenue, all right, which is essentially the largest component of our general purpose revenue is income taxes. The second largest is sales tax. These are tax revenues that we all pay into the state. This does not include any federal money, segregated accounts, etc. So this is just GPR funds. And you'll notice, bottom line, budget of the governor's budget, again, this is the governor's budget. He's proposing an increase of spending of 3.1% over the baseline where we're at today. And if you look at the big increases, health services is by far, again, the biggest increase in our GPR. And that is unfortunately pretty consistent with the recent past. The last budget, GPR increased $1.2 billion to go into essentially Medicaid and Badger Care. So, so you're looking at between the last budget and this budget, $2 billion increase in GPR going into one line item in our state budget. And the reason that I handed out the second graph, and I didn't have a chance to put it in color, so it's kind of boring black and white, but the graph that you see, for those of you that are able to get one of these, this represents the increase in our expenditures for the last 12 years. And you can see healthcare is that one line item that is off the chart almost. And it's consuming a bigger and bigger percentage of our budget. So that's kind of the reality we're dealing with at this point. Next biggest item in the governor's budget, public instruction, 276. And then the third item, the governor had proposed an 8.1% increase in UW system funding, and that's been in the news recently. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. So the other big item is transportation. And not only is there GPR money, a lot of money dedicated to transportation in the governor's budget, but there's also a fair amount of bonding that is being proposed in the transportation budget. So again, just wanted to, this is sort of a high-level picture of what the governor's proposal is. The backside of that handout is shows the governor's proposed increases in staffing levels. And he's proposing, again, this is GPR. This does not include any federal grant money. Proposing just over 300 additional people, statewide in the budget. So, and that's something that a lot of us are taking a good hard look at. Are they needed? Is it going to save taxpayers money? And we've gone through some of these, like with the Department of Revenue, they want to hire more auditors, and they believe, and I chaired the Ways and Means Committee. We had Secretary Rick Chandler in talk about that, and they believe they can generate a lot more revenue through additional collections of past due income taxes, past due taxes, and as well as selective additional audit enforcement. So, their rationale is that we'll add staff, but we'll be able to generate revenue. So, one of the things we've looked at earlier this month, we got a report from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, and one of the things we're looking at, this just came out a few weeks ago, but we got a vacancy report on positions by department and how long those vacancies were open. And again, for GPR, there is we've had some agencies that have had vacancies open, 150 vacancies open 12 months or more. So there's a number of these that we're looking at, and if they're vacant for a long period of time, the question is, do we need them? Are they essential? So, so we're looking at that as well. Bonding. The budget, the governor's budget proposes $2 billion with a B dollars of additional bonding, which is a big number, and we're looking at that closely. The biggest part of that is for transportation, and there are some big projects in the state. The Hone Bridge and the freeway expansion in Milwaukee are the two biggest projects. And I don't think, like with the freeway or the Zoo interchange in Milwaukee, I don't think anybody questions the need to improve that. They've had some issues. They've had to close it for a time. And so we've got some projects that they need to get done. The folks in the DOT are saying this is the time to do it. The need is there, and interest rates are at historic lows. And they looked at the cost of what, if interest rates go up 2 percentage points, what does that do to the cost of the project? And it's got a pretty dramatic impact. So one of the things I've looked at is, with the bonding going up, what's our debt service, our debt retirement structure look like over the next several years? And there's a pretty big spike out a couple years in the debt service demand. So, so if we borrow a lot of money today to do these projects, at some point in time, we've got to pay it back. And one of the conversations that we need to have at some point in time relative to transportation is how we fund those needs. And that is not addressed at all in the governor's budget, but we need to have that conversation at some point here, because there are some pretty significant needs. And these are prominent needs. We also got needs back in rural Wisconsin that aren't being met. So you don't see any big dollars being spent in this budget, out here on some of our rural roads, and there's definitely needs in a rural road. So one of the things that's in the governor's budget is he's proposing a income tax cut. And, you know, the rationale, and I've got, you know, again, data here from the Department of Revenue and also from the Minnesota Department of Revenue showing how Wisconsin compares from an income tax standpoint at various income levels to other states. On the low end of our income levels, we rank fairly low, 34th, 32nd in terms of our income taxes. We've got fairly generous safety net for people making low incomes, 20,000 and less. But our rates escalate pretty rapidly. And so by the time somebody's making in the mid-40s, 40,000 or whatever, our tax rates, our income tax rates in the state are ranked, 7, you go up to 75,000. This is a household income, married couple, pretty consistently at that 5, ranked 5th or 7th highest in the country. So, I understand why, we have this, we're very high in that kind of this middle income category from, say, 40,000 to 100,000, and I understand why he wants to do that, and we'll just have to see. There's a price tag, obviously, to cut taxes, so we'll have to see where that goes. We got a Fiscal Bureau memo just recently on property taxes, and that's always a concern of mine and a concern of most people there. And right now, the governor's budget would essentially keep our property taxes flat. The tax on a median home would go up $25 per year first year and $18 the second year. So pretty modest impact on our property taxes. I wanted to mention to you that there's a couple of issues that I'm trying to address in the budget, and they relate to a business across the street, Land's End. And right now, there's really two issues that relate to them. One relates to Land's End, the assessment process. The other relates to Dodgeville School District. The assessment issue, we've got a process right now that is almost encourages conflict between a business and a community. And you hire your assessor, I'll hire mine. You hire your expert, I'll hire mine. You hire your attorney, and I'll hire mine, and we'll go to court and all that. The city of Dodgeville has spent, I think it's somewhere in the area of $770,000 on legal fees, over the last number of years. That's a lot of services, that somebody could be enjoying in this community. So, and my thought is that for small communities like Dodgeville, for example, that have a huge property that is assessed locally now, would it make sense to have the Department of Revenue come in and assess that, like the Department of Revenue does for manufacturing properties? And I have met with the mayor, I've met with the folks at Land's End, and they both are very receptive to that. So, and I'm trying to, we've got a lot of details to work out yet with the Department of Revenue in terms of how this would be accomplished. But, I guess what I'm trying to do is get a budget amendment through. I've got it all set here, whereby a significant property in a small town, okay, not, there have to be 20, 25 million, some big dollar amount in a small town, and representing a significant part of the valuation of the community would be that the community and the business could elect to have the state assess that. And I just think that, based on the feedback I'm getting here from the mayor and Land's End, they both are very receptive to it. And so, and I think that, we, in a situation like Land's End, Land's End needs the city, and the city needs Land's End, and this system we have set up right now just isn't good. And there are examples like Land's End all over the state of Wisconsin. If anybody drives into Madison, there's a little property on the left there, Epic, you know. I mean, you know, it's happening all over. And again, there's no conflict there, but you know, they may run the risk at some point in time when Judy sells or retires or whatever, you know, kind of like with Gary Comer. I don't think we had any assessment issues here in Dodgeville until after Gary Comer sold it. So anyway, that's one thing. The other thing that I'm working on, and last July, we received reports on how much state aids, estimated state aids, our school districts would receive. And I started looking at that, and it was kind of a high-level report, and I said, well, I want to see the detail. I want to see the spreadsheets and all that stuff. So I got a spreadsheet from every school district in my district, and I got looking at it and for the last 10 years, and I got looking at Dodgeville School District. And the question that I had was, okay, the Land's End assessment issue was settled for 05, 06. Excuse me, those 2 years, fully litigated, settled. And we are not as wealthy as we were based on the original state aids calculations, okay? And, you know, and I've audited a lot of school districts, so I started looking at that, and so I asked the DPI and the Fiscal Bureau to take a look at that. Like, what, had we known, had we received state aids then based on what the courts ended up finalizing the Land's End assessment, what would we have received? And the bottom line is that first year we would have received 124,000 more in state aids for Dodgeville. The second year, $220,000 more of state aids. So for just 2 years, you're looking at $330,000 more of state aids that Dodgeville should have got. And there isn't any automatic reset on this. So anyway, I've got a budget motion going in, and I'm going to try to you know, make the case. It's just a fairness thing, you know, that Dodgeville should have received these funds and didn't. And so and I got a schedule here of all of the impact from all the years, and it's, you know, we don't know how some of these years are still in dispute, so we don't know where we're going to end up with them from an assessment standpoint yet, but you're talking probably $800,000 of state aids for five assessment years, so it's a big number. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, from a business standpoint, unemployment insurance reform. I chair the Small Business Regulatory Review Board, and we had a meeting earlier, and I'll tell you, unemployment insurance for small businesses, I hear that a lot. And I've heard from people in this room their frustration with the current unemployment law. And it's especially tough on small employers because, you know, across the street they've got HR people taking care of their policies and handbooks and filling out all the requirements. We got small business people that have got a handful of employees that, you know, that don't have a handbook, don't have all these systems in place for documentation. What happens is somebody quits or does, and I've heard of examples of people striking a supervisor, not too far from here actually, and applied for unemployment and got it. So there's a whole list of reforms that we're looking at, and I hope get adopted, which I think are going to make a lot more sense to me. One is the misconduct standard, whereby, you know, if you're caught using illegal drugs on the job, drunk on the job, theft of property, you know, we've had situations where somebody steals from the company and is fired and has won the unemployment case because they said, show me your handbook. Show me where you communicated to the employee that they shouldn't steal. You know, that just, you know, I see a lot of people roll their eyes, but that unfortunately flies depending upon the administrative law judge. So anyway, it's those kinds of things. We've had situations where people are getting unemployment compensation and also receiving Social Security disability income payments. The reason you're on disability is because you can't work, you know, so why are you getting unemployment benefits, you know, when you can't work? So, but anyway, we'll be working on these and hopefully provide some, I guess, what I think is just kind of common sense, practical relief for some of our small businesses. Yeah, because like I said, it's a very frustrating area. Another money-related thing, the rainy day fund. We've had a rainy day fund in the state of Wisconsin since 1985. And essentially up until last year or so, it's never been used, or if it's been used, you know, we had a deposit, I think it was in 06 of 56 point some million dollars. It lasted a few months and was rated to help fund, you know, balance the budget. 57 million was taken out. I mean, it never even lasted till the end of the year. So we're looking at that again. I think it makes sense that when, you know, in periods of economic, you know, prosperity, when our revenues are growing faster than what we expected, half of the money is supposed to go into this rainy day fund. And it should stay there, you know, not be rated by, you know, I don't care who the party is, who the governor is, and used for when our expenditures, or pardon me, our revenue does not meet our estimates. So, so anyway, working on that, and hopefully we'll get that through. It's a little, you know, what we really need is a constitutional amendment so that this can't be changed down the road. Because theoretically, you know, we can pass something, and then 2 years from now or 4 years from now, the next legislature, next governor, whatever, could change that. So it'd be nice to get it in the Constitution, but at least we're going to start here. So the last thing I wanted to mention, I alluded to this earlier, the UW system. Fiscal Bureau folks came out last Friday with a memo saying that there was a little bit more money left at the end of last year in the UW system accounts than what probably anybody had expected. And I wanted to kind of share with you how that started. There's 4 of us CPAs in the state assembly, and we meet periodically on budget issues, accounting issues, real exciting stuff, you know. And you know, we're going through the state audit report, and you know, there's the line item, you know, for the UW system, and it was a big number. There's not a whole lot of detail. So we raised the question, you know, why is it so large? What's the breakdown of this and all that? And this is a meeting with Bob Lang, our state budget director. And so Bob said, well, I promise you I'll go back and take a look at it and stuff. So we did, and of course the report was released last Friday. And you know, it's disturbing that, and I don't fault the UW system for having a surplus. You know, I mean, every organization needs money to carry over to start the new year. What I'm disappointed in is that, and I went back to the agency request when they submit their budget requests. I went back to that agency request just in the last few days to look again. You know, did the UW system say, you know, we need X number of dollars for next year, next biennium, but you know, keep in mind we've got this carryover, and there was nothing mentioned of that. So, you know, that's disappointing, and I'm just disappointed, I think, in the leadership. And we've had this pattern in the last few years, and you know, the $33 million paid, you know, for health insurance and pension for employees that weren't there, et cetera. And I just think that you know, it's just disappointing, you know, that we're seeing this kind of repetitive behavior, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, but you know, it's disturbing, and I mean, I graduated from W. Whitewater. My kids went to Oshkosh and Madison, et cetera. You know, so I'm fully aware of the importance of the UW system, but you know, there also needs to be some accountability, and so I think at this point I'm pretty sure there's going to be a tuition freeze for at least the next 2 years, and in terms of this $181 million increase in GPR funding for UW system that the governor's proposed, I think I would be surprised if that whole amount lasts. You know, I think there's going to be, you know, some attempt to cut that. So anyway, I guess that's all I had, and I'll sit down. So thank you.
Thanks, Howard. Dale, Senator Schultz, let you have the podium now.
I'll pick it up. It's really good to see so many smiling faces on a bright, sunny day. You know, it's been depressing enough working on another state budget without getting up and seeing snow all over the place and you knowing it's May. You know, I want to acknowledge something here, and I think it's important that we keep this in mind. The last few years, we've all had a rough go of it, and it doesn't really matter whether you have a business on Main Street or whether you work for a multinational company, you work for the city or the school district. I think everybody knows all of us have made enormous sacrifices. But we're still a community, and we want to be a community. And I want to congratulate the Chamber for its approach today and going forward, because we do need to think about our entire community and to have a little bit longer viewpoint than just a month or 6 months or even a year. Because the institutions, the infrastructure we have needs caring for and planning for, and that means we need partnerships. Businesses have to partner with school districts. Technical colleges have to listen to businesses so that we plan for our labor force, so that we can continue to have the kinds of things that all of us want. I don't want to give you a litany of what's in the state budget, but I want to talk about some of the big picture items that I think you need to keep your eyes on as we go forward from here. When the governor delivered his budget to us, it didn't have a fiscal deficit, a structural deficit. Since then, we've gotten revenue estimates, and we're now looking at, once again, something over $600 million worth of deficit. I want you to know that I think it's critically important that we in Madison keep this in mind. We asked you in the last state budget to all sacrifice and to do with less so that we could balance our budget, which we had historically not been doing. I really think it's important that we not take a step backwards, or you should be asking yourself, what were those sacrifices for? Now, there's always more needs in any budget than there are dollars. That's something I've learned over 30 years, and I bet anybody who's had a household budget or a business budget knows the same thing. It's about priorities, and it's about making intelligent decisions and investments in our future. That's sort of how I look at the budget. I'm going to talk a little more about differences today. I don't mean any disrespect for our governor, but you know, I work for you. I don't work for the East Wing. Doesn't matter which political party owns the East Wing. I'm a legislator for this area. And that's kind of how I approach what I do and how I do what I do. I have to tell you that there is much in the budget that I agree with, and I want you to understand that. I voted for the last state budget, and believe me, it gave me a unique distinction. I was the only legislator in the Capitol that everybody wanted to recall. But you know what? I think it's important to stand up and be counted on issues of principle. And I felt, again, that balancing the budget last time around was something the public was asking for. In my last re-election, people told me a couple of issues. They said, Dale, go to Madison, work together, balance the budget, help generate jobs by enacting policies that will allow us to do that. And I've tried to do that. And I've tried to do it reaching across party lines, remembering in my youth the model of Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, extending a hand to each other, remembering that they were both Americans first and partisans second. Well, I have to tell you, as I look at this state budget, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about a couple of things because, it doesn't matter whether you're a municipality or a school district, there hasn't been a lot of sympathy for cost to continue, how much the electric lights are, how much insurance goes up and the like. I've been focusing in this state budget on budget adjustments for these things in the state budget all the way along. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I think it's important that we be realistic with state government. I think it's important that we should be realistic with local government as well. I have, over the years, supported a voucher experiment in this state in Milwaukee, and we have had a healthy debate about what it costs us. But in the last budget and in this budget, we have had a dramatic effort to expand vouchers, and I am concerned about it. I'm concerned about it because it is enormous in its implications from a policy standpoint, and I have to tell you a little story here. About 25 or 30 years ago, a tall, skinny young man went to a school board meeting at Sauk Prairie. And he had been invited by the school board chairman, one of the most revered and respected individuals of that community, a guy by the name of Melvin Sprecher, a guy who had a hand in forming Wisconsin dairies many, many years ago. And when he got there, he was shocked to see 750 people in the gymnasium who were pretty agitated. And before the speaking even began, before he was introduced, as he stepped to the microphone, a guy in the back yelled, "What the hell are you doing here?" Well, I was that young man. And what I took away from that day was, while the communities I represent regularly squabble over what it gets spent and what gets taught in school districts, thank you very much. We don't need the state government here to tell us what to do. We love our school. That's why we're here. We're passionate about what gets taught there, and we don't want state government interfering. I think that we have seen in recent years an effort to move in the direction of state government having a bigger and bigger impact on local school districts. And vouchers are the biggest. They are not free, and the most recent research that we have done in this state shows that they don't even do as well as our public schools. Now, our Constitution makes it crystal clear that this is the legislature's responsibility to provide a free and appropriate education. We've had Supreme Court decisions that have made it clear that we should be as equal as possible. And we should take into consideration special circumstances such as people with disabilities or folks that need to learn English, etc. I'm not against a debate about vouchers. I don't think anybody ought to be hiding behind a state budget, the only bill we have to pass, and I don't think we should have to stand up for our local school districts and cause the state budget to go to the end of the year. It ought to be removed from this state budget. There are something like 100 policy items that are embedded in this budget. Last session, not last session, the last election, many of you recall me standing in front of you on different occasions saying that it was wrong that the Democrats put so much policy in the state budget. Again, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I don't think we ought to make these kinds of policy decisions in the budget. Now, I was there the first day at Finance when my good friend, the Secretary of DOA, Mike Hipsch, was there and explained this policy had to be in the budget because it was the only bill the governor got to introduce. And to which my response was, if the governor wants to introduce budgets, he should have stayed in the assembly. That's not what governors do. Our founding forefathers made it clear. We have 3 separate branches of government with 3 separate sets of duties. So I am in favor of taking all policy out of the budget. For heaven's sakes, we Republicans have the governorship in both houses of the legislature. What do we have to be afraid of? If as a party we think it's important, we ought to vote for it, and we ought to allow you to judge us based on what we vote for, the merits of our thinking, etc. Now we have a huge deficit, structural deficit. We're going to get some revenue reestimates in May, and many of us are praying late at night hoping that our economy improves and that we don't have to make any more painful decisions, which we know will be passed on to all of you and the things you care about, any more than we have to. It's going to be a serious business. But we ought to be about the business of deciding what is important and what isn't important in the state budget, because that sooner or later we have to balance our state budget. Let me just say that I'm not certain we ought to be subsidizing private schools while we can't afford an increase for our public schools. I just don't think that makes sense. We all should sacrifice together. And we certainly can't afford an expansion. Now the governor has proposed a tax cut, and by and large, I like tax cuts. Most people I know like tax cuts. But in this country, we ought to have learned something, and that is, over the last 20, 30 years, a lot of the tax cuts people have handed us haven't exactly stimulated the economy and made us all, in the long run, better off. The way we score for budgetary purposes, tax cuts, is the same as spending. Now I know that there is a theory out there that that's not really spending and that the economy will grow. Well, I think the facts are in, and that's not exactly the case. I don't want government necessarily to be any bigger than it has to be. But I do believe that we have to fund what we have, or we will be in a continued state of crisis and uncertainty. And I want to just stop at this point and pick up where Howard talked about the university. Everywhere I go, businesses tell me that they are really fearful of the future. They're fearful of uncertainty. I watch the business programs in the morning when I take my coffee, and I buy into that. The Affordable Care Act is pretty scary if you're running a business. You don't know what it's going to cost. And I think it is prudent that they act accordingly. We have this bill for unemployment compensation that's coming due, and every business is getting special assessments, and it's pretty scary. I'd like to see the state step up and help out, because I don't think that ought to be a burden on just small businesses, because we need our small businesses. That's what grows in our society, grows jobs in our society. Now the university is worried about the volatility of their revenues, and they were doing what businesses are doing. They were squirreling away some money, fearful that they were going to get caught. Now I agree with the governor. We don't need a lot of finger pointing here. We don't need to haul out the pointy-headed intellectuals and lay the wood to them. Because every major corporation in this state and in this country is awash in cash, and everybody knows it. We have trillions of dollars sitting on the sideline that could be put to work, and they're all doing it for the same reason: fear of uncertainty. What we need to calm the waters and to put that money back to work and make it efficiently used, whether it is in the private or the public sector, is thoughtful, intelligent problem solvers who are going to sit down and figure out what we need to do to go forward. Now, the subject of the tax cut. If you're a median family income in this state, you're talking about a Happy Meal a month. doesn't go very far. Now, any tax cut is better than no tax cut, I suppose, but you know what, as I travel around my district, it's not the number one thing people ask me about. They said, could you really just fund the government appropriately, pay for our schools, help us pay for our local services where you had a historic partnership? Would you help us fund our technical colleges and do it appropriately so we can grow? That's what I'm hearing. Now, if there's some money there so we can make some strategic tax cuts to help grow some jobs, I'm all for that. But I think it's important that we do a good job running the government. I want to talk about another area of the state budget where we have an opportunity and we have a potential problem. Now, there are some folks here from the hospital, at least one. I know many of you have served on the hospital board here. You know what an important institution it is locally. Howard pointed out in that summation of the state budget that we have a rapidly growing health services expenditure problem in the state, Medicaid. It's because we're getting older. We have a lot of people who are sicker and poorer than they used to be, and a lot of them find themselves in the doorstep of our local hospital, the emergency care rooms. I don't think it's a good thing when people are dependent on government. I don't, as a rule. And I admire our governor for his principled stand to say, look, we need to move people from dependency, from what is an entitlement, to the private sector. Because that's something I'm going to remind him about when we talk about vouchers. We don't need another middle class entitlement. Real conservatives don't do that. But when it comes to health care, I think we have to ask ourselves, can somebody at $18,000 really afford $4,000 worth of co-pays? Or are they going to wind up back on the doorstep of our local hospitals, getting charity care in the emergency room? I really think that there's a good chance of that, and listening to the people who work at the hospitals throughout my district, I am convinced that my initial instincts are correct. I have worked with the healthcare professionals to put together a proposal to, instead of to go to 133 and 133. I don't want to try to bore you with the details of this. It's something you should be paying attention to. The net result is, instead of there being a $105 million charge to the taxpayers, which is what the governor's proposal will do, I would propose that we do that and accept the federal money, like Governor John Kasich has suggested, and saying parenthetically that I don't want my constituents to pay twice. First, for there being less money for providers and more cost shifting within the local health system, and then of course with more people showing up at the doorstep with uncompensated care. Now, I recognize that going down this road with affordable care, we run the risk of the federal government not keeping its promises. Imagine that. But there's a simple solution to that. We face that every single day with the federal government, and we take federal money from them for transportation to a whole host of things. If they don't send us the money, we stop doing things, for heaven's sakes. And we tell people the truth. The net result of the policy which is in the budget right now is that we leave about $2 billion on the table, and we prevent our hospitals from having a soft landing as we make a transition. I think it is very, very important that regardless of our political beliefs, our philosophies, that we remember that all of these government programs that we work on affect our neighbors and our friends. And they have very real consequences. We have had a rough go of it the last few years. But you know what? There's been a lot of wonderful things that I've seen happening as neighbor helped neighbor, as people set aside long-time differences to help one another. I look at this budget as an opportunity for us to continue to work together to make sure our economy grows and that we protect vital government services. I can't be all things to all people. Nobody who serves in the legislature or in the East Wing can do that. But we do owe you the benefit of our thinking and our reasoning so that you know exactly what we're going to do, because what we're doing there is representing you. And I've always thought it was my duty to be a good reflection on the kind of people I represent. So those are my thoughts. I appreciate being here. I want you to know I'm not in that much of a hurry. I'll be happy to hang around and let you vent or ask questions or whatever you like. Thank you very much.
At 7 o'clock tonight at the Dodgeville High School, and it's open to the public and free to attend. So I'm just going to let her talk for just a few minutes, and then I'll come back up and we'll open up to questions for Dr. Stats or Howard or Dale, and we can continue from there. So,
thank you, Bob. I appreciate the invitation to be here this morning, and again this evening. I will just cover in summary some of the items that I'll be focusing on this evening in much greater detail, and showing the effect on taxpayers in Dodgeville and throughout the state of these policy issues in the state budget. But let me just as an overview share with you some of my concerns. It's my belief, after nearly 40 years in public administration and education in the state of Wisconsin, that Wisconsin citizens have consistently made public education a top priority. Yet the 2013-15 budget proposal does not reflect that strong tradition. In fact, the proposed budget erodes the concept of public education, and it really moves towards, instead of public funding maintenance level or even slightly increasing to cover increased costs, public education, it's really promoting public funding of private enterprises. Some of the components of the budget include freezing revenue on public schools, and this is after 2 years of unprecedented cuts in state funding for our public K-12 institutions. The budget significantly raises revenues for vouchers and charter enterprises using taxpayer dollars to do so. Those types of programs include the Milwaukee and Racine parental choice programs known as vouchers, an expansion of those vouchers to other communities around the state, independent charters, and special education vouchers. The Milwaukee and Racine parental choice program at this point in time is, let me go back to briefly to the inception of the Milwaukee Choice program, which was adopted in 1989. Some say we should never provide any public funds to a private entity, period, particularly a school, when we have a responsibility to support K-12 instruction in the public sector. Others have said because of the unique challenges faced by Milwaukee, there had to be some options. So whichever way you believe or people thought in 1989, it's very important that we stop and reconsider where this program has gone, where it is today, where it would go in the future with its expansion. At its inception, it was designed to provide an alternative for low-income families, children living in poverty in Milwaukee. Then poverty was defined as 175% of the federal poverty level. That has since changed to a definition of poverty being 300% of the federal poverty level. Do you think this represents poverty? A family of two, a parent and one child, making $46,000. A family of three at $58,000. A family of four, and if that family has parents who are married and intact, $77,000. Is $77,000 a year for a family of four poverty? I don't think it is in communities around the state nor in Milwaukee. The students that attend the Milwaukee Parental Choice schools are provided almost $6,500 for their education in a private school, many of these parochial schools. That is more public support than the amount of state aid given to 80% of our public schools throughout the state. With less accountability, and as Senator Schultz said, without results being any better, and in most of the studies since the early 1990s showing that the performance was even poorer than in the public schools. Now there's a proposed expansion of the voucher program to other communities in the state. Now that's defined in this budget bill as being districts that have enrollment of over 4,000 students and at the same time have 2 or more low-performing schools. I'm not going to get into the whole definition of low-performing schools, but there is a lot of controversy around how that's being applied on the basis of report cards, where there was a common understanding of not using some of those ratings early on because we're still adapting to the whole report card system. But again, I'll fly over that and just tell you that the districts under that definition that would qualify right now for voucher expansion include most of our other urban centers. So they include Beloit, Fond du Lac, Green Bay, Kenosha, Madison, Sheboygan, Superior, Waukesha, and West Allis, West Milwaukee. You know, the citizens in those communities are not asking for vouchers. The citizens across Wisconsin are not asking for an expansion of vouchers. In this program, priority would also be given to low-income students, and under the current language, that income level is defined by the free and reduced lunch threshold. As with Milwaukee and Racine, the expansion to these other communities comes at your expense. It comes at your expense because the biggest portion of the public funds that support those children in those private schools comes from, I shouldn't say yours, I should say ours, comes from our income and sales taxes because it's the state GPR. Another portion of it comes from the taxpayers in the communities where the choice or the voucher program is in place. So the taxpayers in Milwaukee and Racine are currently paying for a portion of those programs as well. But we need to keep in mind that those programs are already and will continue to be supported by our income and sales tax revenues. So think about your level of support when you realize that you are providing, of that $6,500, you're providing $3,968, almost $4,000. Of that is coming out of the income and sales tax collections. Well, the last voucher expansion that's proposed in this budget is for special needs children. And this is estimated by the Fiscal Bureau to cost about $21 million at its inception. That $21 million that would be used to provide support to private schools who take on children with special needs. By the way, these would most likely be children with mild special needs, not the most costly children to serve. And that $21 million would come out of the state aid that's currently provided to public schools. So public schools would lose these students who are not real costly compared to most of our special needs students to serve. They would lose the state aid to serve the rest of their special needs students, which is already only aided at 26% of actual costs. So public schools' costs would appreciably not go down, yet they would lose the special education aid that would be given to private schools for taking on these students. Well, the phrase was mentioned by Senator Schultz that our Constitution calls for the legislature to develop district schools as nearly uniform as practicable. Given these innovations and these private programs, yet publicly funded, that does not represent a range of opportunities for students or district schools that are any longer as uniform as practicable. At the same time that this budget proposal is calling for these new or expanded programs, it is also freezing revenue for public schools while simultaneously increasing revenue for for-profit organizations. And I think that flies in the face of our statute, Chapter 121, which says that the state is responsible for providing equal educational opportunities. Now, it doesn't mean every school is going to look identical, but it does mean that students in some communities should not have to be suffering from rising class sizes, from diminishing AP opportunities at the high school, from diminishing opportunities all around, because the revenue caps have been in place now for 20 years on public schools. State aid hasn't even been maintained in recent years, and property taxes are going up. It's not fair to the students in public schools to then have money drawn off from the state to support these private enterprises. School aid for public education was cut $800 million in the last biennium. The state has some additional resources now. Rather than steering those to private enterprises, why not go return some of that aid that has been lost by public schools throughout the state? The expansion of vouchers represents significant social reengineering. These kinds of programs are very serious public policy issues that deserve public debate. And I too believe that that debate should occur, but it should occur outside of a budget bill. It should occur within legislative committees so that we can see that our representatives are actually looking at all sides of the issue before making a decision, and it should occur with public hearings that allow the public to weigh in on these in the process, separate from a budget bill. Wisconsinites take elections seriously. We've seen that in recent years. And that's whether they're voting for state level officials or local ones like our school board members. They also expect to hold those individuals accountable for representing their interests. They expect lawmakers to promote public policy that is meaningful for them and that is good for the state of Wisconsin. They are not interested in having ideas, I don't believe, for major changes in public policy come from out of state and to promote someone else's agenda. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. We're running short on time, but Howard and Dale, I know will be willing to answer some questions. Thank you, Dr. Stats, for that. And just a reminder, we are just trying to provide information here. The information that all three of our presenters today have talked about, you can take and you can decipher what you want. You can put your own spin on it and have your own opinions. That's what we welcome. Again, we want to provide information. So I'm going to just ask if there's any questions. Dale and Howard, you just want to answer from there or come up here and answer that way? It would be great. Anybody have any questions for Dale or Howard? Dave?
As a retired Milwaukee Public School elementary principal, I retired in '97. I know one of the problems we had with the voucher program was that after state aid was distributed early in the year, kids that were problems, had special needs or disciplinary problems, they were kicked out of the schools with vouchers. And then we were forced as a public school to serve these kids, and we didn't even have any funding from the state to provide it. Are there any safeguards in this program against that sort of thing happening?
None that I'm aware of. Not only that, as I'm sure you're well aware, the Dale and Howard School of Excellence doesn't have to have certified teachers, doesn't have to have any continuing education, doesn't have to have any state standards or any of the other mandates that the legislature and the superintendent of public instruction and the governor have agreed ought to be imposed on local schools, or they have the bare minimum.
Oh, anything you want to add?
No, the Milwaukee issue, you know, is concerning, should be concerning to all of us taxpayers in the state. You know, that MPS is a, I would characterize as a failing system overall, you know. And you look at the, you know, the dropout rates, graduation rates, you know, and all that, it's we haven't had good results there at all. And so from a taxpayer standpoint, you know, you look back historically, those people that don't graduate and get some skills end up, unfortunately, either welfare, or a lot of them end up in prison, and neither one of them is a real good alternative, you know, for us, and a very expensive alternative for our taxpayers. So, you know, I'm supportive of accountability, and right now in Milwaukee, I think it's over 1 in 5 students now attends a choice school, and these are predominantly Catholic and Lutheran schools in Milwaukee. And you know, we can talk about test results. I think Milwaukee's a unique situation. I don't think anybody. Milwaukee is a highly funded and high cost school system. You start looking at the other schools. You know, I'm not so sure the math works out, you know, quite as well as it does in Milwaukee. But like I said, Milwaukee state taxpayers fund about $8,000 per pupil for the in our public school system, and as Dr. Stotts mentioned, it's less than $4,000 in the choice program now.
Yeah.
I have a question for Representative Mark Lyons. In the last session, you introduced a bill, AB 94, that would have required the state to help the private schools purchase their buildings 10% of the purchase cost. And you introduced this bill. I'm wondering, first, how that would help the constituents that you have in your district, and secondly, how it would help the Milwaukee Public School.
Well, I don't remember all the details of that. The majority of the content of that bill had to do with audit requirements, applications. Give an example. What we did essentially in the bill, one of the things we did was to require that the audits be conducted of these schools in the same auditing standards that are used to audit public schools. You know, our firm audits MPS, and you know, the same audit standards that we use in auditing MPS ought to be used for auditing those choice schools. From an application standpoint, the DPI was requiring that every choice applicant have a full application set of documents. So if a family had 3 children, they would need to reproduce all the tax returns, all of the required data 3 times, as opposed to having one application listing the names of the the family, and then here are the 3 children. So that was another thing that streamlined that. So, you know, most of that stuff in that bill where it was just fairly technical cleanups, streamlining the process. I don't think it does anybody any good to create piles of paper that doesn't help anybody for that matter.
One of the concerns that I have as a school person is that when we talk, and Dr. Stotts, you mentioned the larger communities. Would you repeat those again?
Oh, sure. That with the choice expansion,
Yeah.
just to make sure I don't leave one off, I'll double check. But it's Green Bay, Madison, Beloit, West Allis, West Milwaukee, Waukesha, Superior, and let me just double check. Did I say Beloit, Fond du Lac, Kenosha, Green Bay?
So representing a small school and the rural area in southwest Wisconsin, it's easier for us to think that's not our problem, that's their problem. They're big cities. My concern for the senator and representative here is if this were to pass in this budget, is it logical to assume that that then becomes policy? And beyond that policy, it could open up to all of the schools in the state of Wisconsin, regardless of their size. Is that a logical assumption? What are your opinions on that?
You know, I suppose you can carry that to any conclusion you want, you know. I mean, at this point, I think the governor's proposal is for those communities. I mean, I think before, at least my thinking is that if we've got legitimate public education issues, and I'll go back to MPS, okay? To do nothing, I don't think is an acceptable alternative either. And I'm not saying choice is the perfect solution at MPS, but you know, it's something. And you know, before we start expanding, my preference always is for our public schools to be the core, the base of our educational system. You know, I graduated from River Valley. My kids went to public school. My wife went to public schools. You know, and it serves, our public schools have served our communities for the most part well. They may not serve all of our students well, though, you know, and you know, some other options. I'm very open to homeschooling and people going to to parochial schools. So as far as the policy, I mean, I don't know that there's any plan to extend this on, and there's a lot of us have very serious concerns about the whole expansion proposal, and that's something we're going to be talking about very seriously as the Joint Finance Committee makes their recommendations here in the next few weeks.
To answer your question, absolutely. And I'll even go one step further. The ideological thinking behind this whole movement is that we need competition for the public sector. And I think most of us would sit there and say, well, yeah, maybe we do, because competition is good for all of us. But then I think we have to stop and ask ourselves, can we afford to fund two entities just so they can compete against each other? I think many of you who are involved in schools have seen me before talk about public education, and sometimes we've had some real doozies when it came to what was the right policy, the wrong policy with respect to my role as your state senator. And I mentioned before, even in our own communities, school district to school district, we've had some real Donnybrooks. But you know what? That was us talking about us in our community and our money. There's a whole slew of private enterprises, for-profit entities out there that want to be in on the take of money that's now being spent on public education. I would submit that we don't need this ideological battle to be carried out by for-profit entities at the expense of children. I think we are plenty capable of solving what problems we have in our schools, arguing among ourselves and reaching consensus among ourselves. The loose talk of failing schools has got to stop. And the blaming of public education on every social problem we have in this state has to stop. Not just because it's wrong and unfair to public educators, because it's never going to solve the problem. I don't know anybody who's ever spent time over in Milwaukee, and as leader of the Republicans in the Senate, I spent plenty of time over there. There are a whole host of issues that have to be dealt with. And to simply reduce it down to a slogan and say failing schools, and you know as well as I do, that the report cards that are now being used were never, ever, ever intended to be used that way. They were designed for educators to challenge each other and to begin the process of using real metrics to assess how we were doing with testing. It is the same situation that we have had with our hospitals. These are scary things for hospitals. They're scary for healthcare, because demagogues can misuse this information. They can use it for destructive rather than constructive purposes. I'm all about accountability. I appreciate the fact that Tony Evers sat down with our governor and they talked about it. It's important. They need to engage the public schools in that regard, and we need to go forward. But we ought to stop this loose talk of failing public schools, and we ought to recognize what is at the doorstep. You have to be totally blind and not paying attention to what's going on in this country to not realize that there are enormous economic players in this country who want to turn what is now a public enterprise into private education.
Thank you both.
And with that, Howard's got to leave. I know you've got a 9 o'clock that you got to. It's 9:01. So thank you, Howard. I appreciate you for coming and going to be here. Dale, I know you said you'd be willing to stick around, and Dr. Stats. So again, thank you, Howard, for coming. Appreciate it. And if you'd like to stick around and ask some more questions for Senator Schultz or Stats, we'll continue to take those. Mike, you got a question?
Yeah, I'm Mike Bisbach. Our family homeschools. We have 4 kids, and I'm concerned with the implications. I know, and you probably said it flippantly, and maybe didn't mean it towards homeschooling, but the Mike Bisbach Academy, we're not certified teachers either. I hold a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering. My wife is a registered nurse. She has a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Do you intend to take away some of our rights to homeschool because that's what we feel as parents, that it's our responsibility to educate our kids? Are you going to slowly erode those rights? Because we basically pay our property tax, we give our money to the school district, we don't ask anything in return whatsoever from the school district. They get all of our property tax money. As a matter of fact, I donated time to do some engineering for the school district. I'm not anti-school district, we just chose to do that. But I'm very concerned that there will be an erosion of homeschooling because those families that feel led to do it on their own need that right. We pay probably about $3,000 a child of our own money for curriculum and field trips and those kind of things. So that adds up as well. And we're not asking for relief, but we're asking, you know, for you to I guess I'm concerned with your statement that maybe you're thinking everything has to be public school and all of a sudden our rights are going to be eroded as well.
Well, Mike, I'm surprised to hear you say that. I have 30 years of support for homeschoolers. And I have pointed out, as Diane knows, and to every other superintendent I've had, every other school board I've had, that you work with these people, they will be the best supporters of public education in your community because of their passion and their willingness to sacrifice and their whole personal belief that education is critically important. Many homeschoolers, as you know, are only homeschooled to a certain point and then they wind up in the public schools. So first of all, let me just say, if I led you to believe that, I'm sorry, but we have had the Howard and Dale Schools of Excellence in Milwaukee that have been absolutely fraudulent disasters, and people shouldn't be fooled by that. And I see a huge distinction between that, homeschools, and the people that we have who have strong religious beliefs who want their children schooled in religion along with public education. I've supported that. We, for many years, have had a good working relationship between public and parochial and homeschooling. But this is something very different.
Okay, well, I just wanted to be sure because
I hear you. I hear you.
It's like this person said, sometimes it starts out this way and then pretty soon it ends up going into another
I think you
category.
got 30 years with a pretty clear direction of where I stand on homeschools.
And our kids will attend the university system, so it's not that it's just at this point in time that's what we feel is best for them, and I want to protect them.
Other questions? Marilyn?
In my reading, I'm finding that there's a distinct difference between charter school and what we've had in the past versus what's being proposed for the voucher school. And the distinction is accountability. Could you explain what the end?
First.
I'm wondering, Marilyn, if, let me go in this direction, and if this isn't what your concern or need for clarification is, then I'll come back to the distinction between charters and vouchers. But I'm guessing that some of where the confusion might lie is between charters, which we've had now for a decade and a half, and independent charters. And what's proposed in this budget is an expansion of what we call independent charters. They are allowed to occur presently in Milwaukee and Racine. And so these are non-public school directed charter entities. And so they are not chartered at the design, will, or oversight of a local school board. And they are not accountable to the state in the way that public schools are accountable to the state. It's different when a public school develops and a school board instigates its own or institutes its own charter school. That is a school or a portion of a school. Sometimes it's within a high school, sometimes it's a separate high school, sometimes it's an elementary school, but it is an educational entity within the public schools overseen by the Board of Education. So these independent charters are funded by the taxpayers both in the community where they exist and all of the rest of us. I'll get into this in more detail tonight, but all of the taxpayers in Dodgeville are helping to support those independent charters that presently exist in Milwaukee and Racine. And the budget bill calls for expanding that beyond, with the view towards making those available anywhere in the state through a board, a statewide decision-making body that would authorize charters in communities, whether or not those communities wanted them or not. So does that help? Is that your?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that might be.
How many charter schools do we have in the States, you know? You got a guess?
Oh, I don't know.
There is no evidence in Wisconsin that school boards have been negligent and irresponsible and unwilling to offer alternative types of education for educational purposes or for different styles of learning, learning styles, etc. What is new about this initiative is it sets up a statewide school board which will have the authority to reverse local school board decisions. I wish I had a nickel for every time people said, well, don't you guys believe in local school boards anymore? Well, I want to make the record clear here. I do believe in local school boards, and we don't need this. And at the very least, again, if we're going to go down this road, people ought not be hiding behind, I had to vote for the budget. They ought to have to stand up and debate this, allow it to be amended in the normal legislative process if we're going to go down this road. Look, I've been involved with a lot of charter schools over the years, like I have, with other types of schooling. And, not too far from here at Highland, they have some project-based learning going on around the environment. I think those are wonderful schools. And many kids learn better in a project learning environment. And frankly, I think I had this opportunity when I was young, I probably would have taken it because I'm one of those kids. Still feel that way, a kid.
Other question? Yeah, sir.
Yeah, two things. One is I just want to throw out an analogy about the way I see this system. It seems like the public school system in Milwaukee in particular, where the public schools are, seems like the roof is leaking on the house, and rather than trying to fix the roof, we're just going to build a new house next door and abandon the house we had. So I'm all for what you said in supporting the public school system. If there's a problem, we need to fix it and not abandon it to go do something else. The other thing is, I really like what you said about getting policy items out of the budget. How successful do you think you'll be in trying to do that?
I think this depends as much on you as me. I think if we speak loudly, we can be more successful than you know. And I'm the kind of person who doesn't define success as having everything my way. But I think, if there's a broad consensus and there's no controversy about some policy, I'm not going to sit there and have a fit over it. But for heaven's sakes, folks, this is the one thing that the legislature, your state government, is held responsible for in the Constitution. And it seems to me we owe it to you to have a thoughtful debate. The process is important. have a lot of legislators around me wax eloquently about how much they respect the institution. Well, that's what we're talking about here. Do you respect the people and the institution enough to stand up to say what needs to be said, when it needs to be said, in a fully transparent manner, and then to be held accountable for those decisions? Again, I can't be all things to all people, and I vote on a lot of bills, and believe me, on more than one occasion, I've had my tail end singed. I worked very hard to get Wisconsin Eye in this state, so you don't even have to go to Madison so you can watch what I and my colleagues do. But if we hide behind a budget, you'll never know. So I'm going to do everything in my power to make certain that we have these important decisions removed from the budget and the other things that I've talked about that I believe in. And my office is open. I've been traveling around southwestern Wisconsin here as much as I can, as many waking hours as I have to listen to you and your neighbors about the other things that are important, so that together we do the best job of telling our story in Madison, and I'll come back and tell you what happened.
Other questions? Take one or two more, Mike.
As I look at the proposed legislation for the vouchers, one of the things I see is that these new 9 school districts that could be involved is the legislation deviates from the idea that the vouchers are there for people that are coming from schools that maybe haven't been adequate and they need another opportunity. As I read the legislation, it says in those districts, students can go with vouchers to any school in the district, even though that school was not designated as a failing school as far as the evaluation of a school accountability. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. I've heard that. I have not
That's in the
read.
legislation.
Okay.
I read it last
And
night.
this was particularly discussed in Green Bay because think about this. If you are in a school district and you have, X number of boys and girls and you have to efficiently educate them, what happens when you start saying, oh, you can go to any school you want? Well, I want to go over there for sports reasons, or that's a newer school. This is real life. This is what your school board faces every day in any district that has multiple schools. And of course, transportation is a huge expense, and there is no cost to continued dollars coming down. So how are we going to pay for this? Are we going to have bake sales, or are we going to have referendums every year? That's really what it boils down to. And I've taken a lot of heat for the referendums that have been out here, but I do hear you. And I just think that, again, this is a complicated initiative. And if we're going to go down that road, and I respect people who disagree with me, then we at least ought to have the courage of our convictions to have a debate on the floor of the legislature on only this issue. And people ought to be free to vote their conscience in their district.
Time for maybe one or two more questions, and we're going to wrap up here.
Well, my question mainly opinion, and that is 2 years ago. It's kind of hearsay because he's not here right now. Howard stated that at the end of the day, the legislature was mostly theater. And I told him that I was offended by that statement. He basically, he didn't basically, he just said, all right. I think that a lot of my problem with some lawmakers is attitude. And I don't believe that, Sheriff. You can only speak for yourself, but I'd like you to answer that, whether it's theater up there, the lawmaking that you do. At the end of the day,
Well,
I told him he's messing with people's lives.
Shakespeare said all the world's a stage. So, look, this is serious business. And are people passionate, and will they use rhetoric and do things in a way to carry the day? Of course they will. But anybody who loses sight of the fact that what we're doing is serious, is important, is making a tragic mistake. And I didn't hear Howard say that, so I'm certainly not going to comment in that regard. But I certainly take this all very serious, but from time to time people have seen me get passionate, and for some folks that's kind of scary. There was one last question,
One
yeah.
last question? All right, we'll want to know that.
I think we all would agree that the education of our children is a very critical part of living in a democracy. It's absolutely of paramount importance. And two of the values that have been a part of the education of our children has been the separation of church and state. And the second one being that the local schools are controlled by local school boards with opportunities for citizen input. Now, my concern about the voucher program is it feels like it challenges both of those. It sort of throws out both of those values. First of all, public funds will be used to fund education that is parochial education, either Catholic or Lutheran or whatever, Jewish, I don't know, there's a variety. The other thing that concerns me, as my understanding of the voucher program, is that it'll be run by a statewide voucher school board that are appointees by the governor, and that there will be no opportunities for citizen input into this school board, that this is managed in kind of an insular way. And it feels to me like that is a very deep concern, and I would agree. I don't think we can afford two different school systems, especially one run in contradiction to these two important values.
I agree, and I think you said it very well, but let me just also say something that my old friend, the late Governor Lee Dreyfus used to say. He who has the gold rules. And there are many parochial schools over the years who have said, we don't want state interference. We don't want to be involved because we want to be able to do what we want to do. We heard Mike talk a little while ago about homeschoolers. For the most part, they want to be left alone, and these principles have served us well. And for all of those parents who have chosen that other route, I salute them for their passion, for their beliefs, and they do support public schools. From time to time, they use both. And I think these are important and time-tested guiding principles for education in our society. And if we're going to change them, again, I repeat, we ought to do it in full daylight with complete transparency. I will hang around. I know you all have daily lives to get on with, but if somebody wants to, like I said, vent or just discuss this a little more, I'll be happy to hang around.
Can we give a round of applause to Dale and Bambi, and also Howard, again, thank you, thank him. Just a couple real quick announcements. On your table is some handouts. Again, Dr. Stats will be giving a presentation tonight at 7 o'clock. If you'd like more information about this, encourage you to come to that. And as Dale said, this is and Howard said as well too, our intent to this whole thing is to foster discussion, and I was able to talk with a lot of you over the last couple days, and we've got people not just from Dodgeville here, but from Belmont and Pecatonica and so forth, and we want to continue to foster these kind of discussions. I know Dale's office, anytime he said it, and I'm sure Howard is. I know Howard as well too. If you'd like to talk to either of them more, you'll be seeing some more information coming out. Yes. Sure, and
That would have been fair.
well, and I agree with you 100%. And so,
Very fair, very biased.
Yep.
Presentation, very one-sided, in my opinion. I would have liked to hear both sides of the equation.
Yep, and
I'm disappointed.
well, I understand that as well too. So, and just so you know, our intent at the Chamber of Commerce is to. It wasn't just supposed to be about school vouchers today. Our full intent today was to have Dale be able to come and Howard be able to come and give a general update. And
It's clear to me on the Dodgeville district website that it was all about school vouchers. I don't think Howard realized that.
sure.
I did speak with Howard,
Sure.
and I'm very surprised that Howard didn't voice his opinion, because I know where he stands on vouchers, and it's not necessarily in support of vouchers. I expected certainly that he would speak his mind, and he had that opportunity to do so. So having Dale here and having Howard here actually provided an opportunity.
Ron mentioned that wasn't the
That
purpose of
didn't
this
come out.
meeting.
The purpose of again the
That's
prime.
correct, that's correct.
So the primary purpose, and we'll end on this. The primary purpose of what we're trying to do with this breakfast and what we're trying to do with our advocacy efforts is to provide information, not one side or the other, and we're not always going to do it perfect. And so my apologies if anybody comes across that way, that we are favoring one side or the other. That's not our intent at all. And so what I would say with that as well too is we continue to work on becoming new advocates for the community, because we're new to this. We're going to make mistakes as we go forward. We're going to make decisions that some people may agree or not agree with. Our whole intent is to open opportunities to talk with Dale, to talk with Howard, and to talk with other representatives that come into the area, whether they're a U.S. congressman or whatever the case may be, to foster discussion. And so that's going to be what we're going to be doing moving forward. Thank you again for coming. Again, if you'd like to talk to me or Dale or Bambi or Howard, we would be able to talk with that, and we'll get everybody on their way. So thanks for coming.